Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our first regional community conversation here, bringing together business, academia, government, and civil society here in the Borderplex. We're really delighted to have you all attend here. This event is hosted by the Arrowhead Center at New Mexico State University, by Technology Hub in Ciudad Juarez, the Medical Center of the Americas Foundation, and Pioneers 21, formerly known as the Hub of Innovation here in El Paso. So, and on behalf of the leaders of these organizations, Kathy Hansen, Ricardo Mora, Emma Schwartz, and un servidor, I would like to welcome you and to thank you for spending the next hour with us. I'm Carlos Martinez Vela. I'm the Executive Director of Pioneers 21. And we're a business incubator here in El Paso, and I will be moderating this conversation with assistance of all the team that is making this technically possible behind at NMSU. So before we get started, I would like just to tell you how this is going to work and to give you some housekeeping rules. After this introduction, each of our three guest speakers are going to offer remarks for up to 10 minutes each. Then we will have 20 minutes of Q&A, which I will be moderating. And as you know, we are learning as we transition to doing our meetings via and our seminars and everything via in the virtual world. So please bear with us if we experience any technical issues or glitches. So in terms of the questions, you will. Please note, as you listen to the remarks of each of our panelists, please note your questions so that you can submit them via the chat function of Zoom after the remarks are finished. That's when the chat is going to open for Q&A. I will be getting them, and then I will pass them along to our panelists. And we're if you have any questions, just put them there in the chat room too. So with that, I just want to mention why we're here together. So we've come together with one particular goal, which is to preserve and to amplify the collaborative spirit that we have worked very hard to build over the years here in the Borderplex across our 3 cities, 3 states, and 2 countries. In these times of crisis, I think we all retreat to our corners as we seek to cope with challenges, to survive. That's the natural instinct. But really in this moment, as in everything else, we are in this together. And that's really the kind of spirit and the forum that we are aiming to create with this regional community conversation, especially as we start shifting our attention beyond the emergency time and towards the recovery of our small businesses, industries, urban economies, and the regional economies as a whole. So it's great that we have, as our 3 panelists today, represented 3 of the sectors of the drive our societies and economy. Representing higher education, we have Dr. Dan Arvizu, Chancellor of New Mexico State University. Representing business, we have Alan Russell, President of Grupo Tecma, a binational, also global corporation, one of the most important here in our region, and Ricardo Samaniego, Judge Ricardo Samaniego, County Judge of El Paso. We've given them a few questions to reflect on for their remarks. The first one, they have to do with the following issues. One is, how are your organizations dealing with the crisis? What are the 3 most important challenges? What opportunities for innovation have you identified? What are the workforce challenges? And how can we better collaborate as we move forward towards recovery? So each of them is going to offer their remarks around these broad subjects as they see fit, depending on their context. And with that, I would like to turn over the floor, the video, to our first panelist, Dr. Dan Arvizu, Chancellor of New Mexico State University.
Thank you, Carlos, and welcome to all of the people who are watching us via this video transmission. Let me just first of all say thank you, Carlos and the organizers, for putting this all together to give us an opportunity to share a few of our thoughts on things that are happening in our various sectors, and also to talk a little bit more about kind of what our insights relative to what the future holds. So I'm pleased to be on the panel with Alan Russell and Judge Samaniego. So we'll get an opportunity, hopefully, to have some interactive exchanges as well. Let me start, and I'll try to be brief. I'll try to do this in less than 10 minutes, talk about a little bit of the context setting for the question you just posed. So at NMSU in our system, which I had over the main campus and our 4 community colleges that are associated with New Mexico State University, I will say a couple of things that are pretty important. So first of all, we've tried to address everything in terms of the challenges that this COVID-19 pandemic has faced us with based on a set of principles. And the 3 principles are the following. The first principle is that we want to ensure that we have a safe and secure and we care about the well-being of our students, our faculty, and our staff. So number 1 priority is let's make sure we're safe. So that's kind of the first thing that we start with. The second priority is we have a mission, and the mission is education and instruction. We're a land-grant university. We are focused on our mission, and we want to continue to the greatest degree possible to maintain and continue progress on academic instruction. So our intent was to not close down universities, but in fact to move from a face-to-face instruction, which is where most of our students are engaging with our university system, to one where we obviously have to do things in a remote setting, virtual, and ultimately online kinds of activities. Those are the 2 primary principles. We started with those were important. The third principle is one that kind of relates to this conversation. And that principle was look into the future. What are we learning in the process of making this transition, which none of us anticipated and was very, very difficult to foresee? What are we learning in the process of the things that we've had to do to prepare ourselves for this transition to then on the other side of the pandemic, when we are more I think in a better position relative to managing the health crisis that it relates to, and in the process of reopening our economy, what have we learned that we can take forward so that we're better on the other side of this cycle than we were going in? So that is an idea of trying to understand what's different and how can we be better at what we do going forward. So based on those principles, I mean, the biggest issues that we faced with, of course, was this transition from the face-to-face instruction, totally anticipated in a lot of different ways, from our local planning. If you talk to health professionals, they will tell you that this is not like it's been, a total mystery to people. We've been talking about the national need to deal with a pandemic in the future at some point in time for literally decades. I've seen reports from the national academies and other places where it's very clear that the warnings were there. We knew what was going to happen. We knew it was coming. We knew what the roadmap for preparing ourselves were. We didn't listen. And here we are faced with something where our infrastructures are not able to accommodate the challenges that we have. And in the context of that, we've got to deal with this pandemic with the only tools that we have. The only tools that we have is, first of all, inadequate testing is a big problem, but the tools that we have is social distancing and isolation and quarantine and those kinds of things. And that's the tool that we're using. And to a large degree, it's been successful to mitigate the impacts. But it also, I think, highlights the fact that as a country, as a nation, over multiple decades, we have not been really responsive to what I would call preventive medicine. We're pretty good at crisis management. We're very, very bad at preventive medicine. So we've got to deal with that in terms of a long-term strategy. And that also relates to what we do in the academic institutions, because in fact, I think we have a role to play in terms of infrastructure. So moving from a face-to-face to an online, and we've kind of gotten through this thing. I was told when I came in a couple of years ago that making a transition to fully online would be near impossible or would take many years. I was told telecommuting is not something that we really are too fond of, and we have too many challenges with that. Lo and behold, when this crisis hit, we were able to make those transitions to fully online and to telework within a matter of weeks, out of necessity, not because we wanted to necessarily, but because we had to. And it's taught us a lot of lessons. I mean, we are already recognizing that we can do things efficiently using these online media and to do those kinds of things. So that's really an important part of, I think, what we've learned. Again, our focus has continued to be on, let's deal with the immediate crisis in ways that can be responsive to the communities. And so clearly food insecurity was one of the first things that we had to deal with, with the disruption of our normal practices, whether it be in public education, K through 12, or higher education. We have challenges that we've got to do in order to meet the needs of just human basic needs, things like food insecurity. On our campus, we had 700 plus students that did not have a place to go. Many of them are international students. Many of them come from rural communities. Many of them don't have access to internet. And so if we're going to continue instruction, we had to have a role for having a place for students who did not have any other place to go to be on campus. And so we have 750 plus students on our campus right now, and we are practicing social distancing. We're making sure that any one student, is not sharing a bathroom with somebody else. So we're doing the things that are necessary, again, to keep our students healthy, but to also give them access to the instruction that's continuing to go on. So those are things that I think are part of our immediate activities. Again, there's been a lack of the ability to test universally. We can't test everybody that we want to test, limited amounts of testing. We're trying to stand up a testing capability at NMSU, working with the governor's office and people that are part of that. We are also very engaged in working with the community on everything that relates to the PPE, the personal protection equipment that is necessary for our first responders, who have turned out to be the heroes in this pandemic. The people who are on the front lines. We have the people who are at the communities, in the communities departments at the schools, handing out food to families as necessary. In our case, the Aggie Cupboard. I'm sure at UTEP they have a similar, food pantry of sorts that people are accessing. So providing in addition to the first responders that are in the hospitals dealing with ill patients, we're also dealing with interacting with the state and the community in ways to help our communities be more I think able to manage the challenges that they have. It's given rise to additional collaborations, and I'm very pleased to say that one of the things that I'm happy about is the collaboration we have with El Paso Community College, UTEP. Dr. Wilson and I speak frequently. Dr. Lang and I from Texas Tech Medical Center also speak on occasion. And we're trying to keep coordinated, because as a region, we have to kind of, I think Carlos said it well, we're in this together, and our region has to protect, insulate itself, and otherwise manage what the future might hold. So there's a lot of things that we can and I think do. We've got relationships with University of Texas, El Paso, and specifically around our Studio G and entrepreneurship. I'm pleased to say, we formed an agreement not too long ago where we would open up our innovation and entrepreneur practice called Studio G at UTEP. And they've got 26 new ventures, and 42 student entrepreneurs are already engaged in that collaboratively with NMSU and UTEP students working together on everything from high-tech projects to all kinds of services, water filtration support devices for surgery, a variety of things that are happening, I think, that are collaborative, and I'm very, very, very important. I'm very, very pleased with. So these are all things that I think I'm pleased to be able to say that we're a part of right now. The last thing I'll say before I close my remarks is we are very much focused on looking at what does the future hold. Again, collaborative opportunities with the private sector and the public sector to help us both manage our campus, manage our mission objectives, and manage the research efforts that are going to be necessary to put the necessary infrastructure in place to serve not just our communities, not just our states, but the broader world beyond. So I'll stop there, recognizing there's going to be questions to be asked and we've got a limited amount of time. So that's a little bit of the story from academia. I'll be attentive to hear from the business sector and the government sector as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Arvizu, for those important insights. For those of you who joined, might have joined a few minutes after we started, you're going to be able to submit your questions after our three panelists conclude their remarks. We just heard Dr. Dan Arvizu, Chancellor of New Mexico State University, and you pointed safety, keeping the core functions along with safety going along, how this is accelerating change, the relevance of preventive medicine, the basic needs, which I think we're all very aware of right now, from PPE to just the basic needs of society, right? How do we keep them going? And I think it will be important once we get to the questions to reflect on what we can all learn from this. So now our next perspective, we just heard higher education. Our next perspective is business from one of the main and most important most important corporations in our region. We have with us Alan Russell from Grupo Tecma. It's a binational global corporation, very, very involved in facilitating and creating manufacturing facilities and other areas in the region. So Alan, with that, please share with us your insights about these questions we're discussing. You're on mute, Alan.
There we go.
There you go.
Thank you, Carlos. Chancellor, a pleasure. Judge, it's a pleasure to be on the panel with you. Let me start by addressing some of the challenges that we've got in our cross-border business. There's some opportunities and some perils that we have to address going forward. In Juarez, approximately 300,000 people, 330,000 people were employed in what we refer to as the maquila business before the pandemic. There's been a systematic closing of facilities, which has reduced that workforce down to probably 150,000 thus far. About half of those companies have closed, some by government mandate because they were receiving complaints from employees, unsafe working conditions, or probably the majority have closed because their markets have closed. They don't have any place to ship their product to. The clients are suffering from a retail or consumer product type issue. So the challenge that we're having, even for the essential businesses, the United States has published a list of essential businesses that need to run to keep our basic services going. Mexico has not matched that essential list. Mexico has a very short list, basically stating medical and most recently automotive, anything emergency related could stay in business. However, it's been difficult to register ourselves as essential so that the Mexican government recognizes that we're essential. There's been some random closings of factories that were essential, but the government not being able to address them properly or with good research on why they would be essential. So the danger of that is these companies closing down and the US starting up, and we see this on a daily basis right now, where the US, the state of Texas, all of the states, including New Mexico, are addressing this issue of how to get back in business. And so the companies getting back in business are going to start pulling on the supply chain. And they're going to require the Mexico factories to supply. That's Mexico's, especially in our region, we are a supply chain organization as a group. And if we can't supply that demand, the consumers of that demand are going to go somewhere else for the supply immediately. If the automakers in the US start up and the auto supply companies in Mexico can't supply, the automakers immediately will turn to a supply base that can supply them, whether it's China, whether it's Europe, back in the United States, where it may be. We could lose 20% of of our industry in this region as a direct result of that issue, that would be devastating for our region. We've got to get a system in place where we can match the essential businesses on the Mexico side with the essential businesses on the US side to accommodate that. Now, we have some great proponents of this working hard. Secretary of Innovation for the state of Chihuahua, Alejandro de la Vega, is very passionate about this and is helping carry this message with the governor all the way to Mexico City. But that is a concern we have. That's got to be a collaboration between government and industry to get this going. Like the Chancellor said, it's incredible how fast our innovation has moved forward based on needs. Everything we were doing in our company, we had a goal of being paperless and reducing duplication of paper over the following years. Well, that certainly has accelerated. We're doing things with the Mexican government and the US government paperless that was only a consideration before this pandemic. So, and of course, we're all video conferencing. In our company, let me explain a few things about what we're doing to do this safely. You know, keeping these factories running, even the essential factories, doing it safely has been job one. Job two is keeping the commerce moving. So in our plants on the Mexico side and our distribution facilities on the US side, there is constant education. Everybody gets their temperature taken before they get on the bus. Everybody gets their temperature taken before they enter a facility. We have a protocol internally. Everybody's wearing masks. We have distancing where it's possible in the facilities to assure people's safety. We are extremely passionate that keeping these young people, the workforce in Mexico is younger than we would think. It's probably mid-20s on an average. Keeping these people safe means focusing on education, focusing on their continuous education so that they don't take this virus home. So they're not the one that's going to take it home to their elders and their families. Teaching them that the quinceañeras and the birthday parties and so forth, culturally very difficult to stand away from, but passionately, we've got to keep that education in front of them. If we close all these factories and we put all of those young people on the streets, we are concerned that they are not going to have that reinforcement. They're not going to be passionate about that safety. And this pandemic will last longer and affect more and be more devastating to all of us, especially in this cross-border community where we have people moving back and forth. So what we do on the US side, we've got to mimic and force into place on the Mexico side, and vice versa, so that we're moving as one region and as one community. Because it's, I heard someone say it's like pee in a pool. If there's pee in one end of the pool, you can't be in the deep end and think you're going to avoid it. We've all got to work together to make sure that our region stays safe. So that collaboration is so important. In El Paso, when the mayor put in the restrictions and the lockdown for business in El Paso, and we had some essential businesses, there was a code enforcement team came to our distribution facilities and reviewed us and gave us a thumbs up by the protocols that we had in place and what we would do if we had somebody that became ill, what we would do every morning as people come in, and the education and the posters. I strongly feel that we can start opening our community to business based on what we've learned. There are businesses operating safely today, and they've stayed in business, and they're doing it without continued exposure and risk. Just think about it, the grocery stores, UPS, FedEx, Homebase, Home Depot, USPS, the restaurants that are doing takeout. Starbucks is serving coffee every day out the window. These companies are doing this with protocol and doing it safely. And we can start opening businesses in El Paso and on the Mexico side and in Las Cruces in this region, doing it safely. And we have the code enforcers that go and inspect. And if you're not doing it safely and you're exposing your employees to danger, then you can't participate. But it's a step-by-step way that we can get back into business and not lose or have any more of our small businesses fail. I just passionately feel it's so important. That's part of what I feel like our recovery plan should be. And I'll wrap my remarks on that. And thank you, Carlos, for the time.
Thank you, Alan. I mean, what a complex undertaking you describe, right? In terms of all the, as for all of us involved in this conversation, but for the university, for government to balance all of these needs and outcomes and dangers and safety and while trying to minimize the damage that we do to our society and our economy in the process, right? I'm fascinated by what you described about how keeping workers in the job under strict safety conditions that keeps them safe can be a way to expand, to improve the public health outcomes across the board, and the need to learn from those who are doing this in a safe way, protecting health. Thank you for those remarks. I'm sure there will be more around this as we go to the Q&A. As a reminder, you will be able to submit the Q&A after the remarks. Our next and last panelist, we're honored to have Judge Ricardo Samaniego, who's a county judge from the county of El Paso, with us. He was one of the instigators of this conversation, so thank you for that. So Judge, share with us.
Carlos, thank you very much. Chancellor and Alan, I think one of the things that you're seeing immediately is the complexity. And the more people understand the complexity in our community, the more they're going to be able to assist us in our vision. Having this type of audience is extremely, extremely important for all of us. It's really important because as we move forward, we need to hear from each other. We need to understand each other. Just by hearing Alan speak, that triggers me, right? I'm here, the county judge, and I'm hearing what are some of the issues. And at times, maybe the first time that I hear some of the issues, and that allows me then to establish my work, my workforce and my network and the people around me that I can connect to make sure that I address what Alan is having to deal with. And if he's having to deal with a very humanitarian, not only economic, because remember that our relationship with Mexico is very important to us, and their well-being of their workforce is very important to us, because the outcome will be, how are we going to go out of this pandemic? So that's very, very important, this complexity that we keep hearing about. Now, I've always tried to bring to the discussion that we need to understand who we are as a community. And I get a lot of people telling me that they hear a lot of reprimanding, but they don't hear a lot of sort of la felicitaciones of our community and allow our community to understand that we are appreciative of what they're doing and the efforts that are taking place. And that when we single out the few that are not obeying, it doesn't help us, because I really believe, and I'm hoping, I heard that in the passion of the Chancellor and Carlos and Alan, that there has to be a spirit of our community that has to be the foundation of moving forward. It is going to be that spirit, like you would get a team going and getting excited about winning a game. That's what we have to do. So I always bring forth our capacity and our capability and our humanitarian gestures when we had the refugees in our region. And most people did not even know that close to 1,100 refugees on a daily basis for over 30 days crossed our borders. We helped them feed them, dress them, and process them. And all the faith-based community came together. And if I could give one reason as to our success, it was that collaboration that we'll be talking about. Then we had the unfortunate tragedy, August 3rd tragedy. You know, something that was very different to us. This took place in a city that was known as one of the safest cities in the country. And that safest city allowed us to bring industry for people to feel good about coming to El Paso. And so when we were violated in a lot of different dimensions. The most important, obviously, the humanitarian and the pain and the families that had to deal with that. The impact on our economy was huge. We also then started the pandemic, and we're now about to do something that's really important for us. We have been talking about regional approach in so many dimensions for the longest time. I know we went in, Bob Wingo's doing an incredible job on branding us as a region, branding us as a force, as a region. If this does not bring us together, I don't know what else could possibly bring us together than us surviving. This is a humanitarian. This has to do with our economy. This has to do with the future of El Paso region and Las Cruces and Juarez region. What happens, how we handle things, since we were already at a disadvantage of going from the safest city to then having that situation, we need to come out of this showing the rest of the world that El Paso does come out of these things, that El Paso is a great place to live in, that El Paso is where you should bring your business. So we have one more opportunity, and that opportunity is coming together. We know that the governor, and one of the things that is very important, and this vision that we have is really important. And one of the concepts that I want everybody to understand is that when we started, we were the last in. We had the fewest cases, and we went into, you know, an incline. And so we're behind the curve 3 to 4 weeks. And so the balance between hearing what Governor Abbott would like for us to do and balancing that with flattening the curve is in fact a huge challenge. But I understand the business community is wanting and has a really legitimate argument about there's already existing businesses that are capable of opening their business and at the same time helping us flatten the curve. So I agree wholeheartedly, but we are working. And remember that I believe that we started with public health guiding us and then saying, how do we minimize the impact on the economy? And that helped us tremendously. We're now shifting a little bit, saying, let's focus on the economy and make sure that we don't have the spread of the virus at the same time. So that is, in fact, one of the biggest challenges that we have. And as a government, and I'd like to say that when I'm here, I've had a tremendous relationship with Mayor Margo, and I know he'll be on in the future, as well as the Las Cruces mayor. But Mayor Margo and I have been in lockstep in trying to make sure that we work with each other. One of the fundamental premises and success factors that we have is we have a strong legislative team that is very supportive. We have great Congresswoman Escobar has been extremely helpful, and Congressman Hurd as well, and Congresswoman from New Mexico as well. So we have a huge force of people trying to help and go forward. And this is probably one of the first steps that we're taking to show this regional strength. And we need to help each other. You know, if we're pulling hard from El Paso and forget Juarez, then somebody's got to remind us. And the same thing with Las Cruces. Now, I can tell you without a doubt that the numbers are going to be a huge factor in how fast we move into our economy. It'll be very difficult for us to move quickly into the economy if Juarez and Chihuahua are having huge difficulties, and if El Paso's numbers are not going down, and New Mexico's aren't going down. So we are in it together. You know, I thought of, I wanted to think of an analogy. I think Alan's is very well put about the swimming pool. But so anyway, I do know that if everybody feels this regional tug, if everyone senses what this is all about, that we're all in the same boat, you know, if you're on one side of the boat and there's a leak on the other side, it doesn't matter, right? You're on the other side of the boat, that leak is going to get to you sooner or later. And that's where the situation that we're in. I happen to be, you know, I was 10 years with a maquiladora. I was on the board of directors of a MAC. So I have a tremendous amount of you know, just trust and faith. And I know what's happening there. I also know that I visited several cities prior to taking, you know, starting as a county judge. And I always remind people that when I was in Pittsburgh and I went to Detroit and I went to other cities, one of the things that they said were the reason they became successful. Pittsburgh being the lid to hell, as they used to call themselves, to where they are now, and Detroit repurposing themselves to technology is unbelievable. But you know what they claim is that the universities, if the university is not leading, it doesn't happen. And so we're very honored that we have our Chancellor, Dr. Heather Wilson, Dr. Serrata. We have people that are going to lead the charge. Texas Tech, you know, with Richard Lang, Dr. Lang. So we are in the right path. The university has a tremendous resources, vision, and capability that we can in not any way afford not to bring them into the picture. I think we haven't done the best job as government to do that. We happen to have a great relationship with UTEP on the aerospace and at the Fabens Airport. You know, we are working together, but now I'm calling and challenging everyone on this call to figure out, you know, what is it that I can do on a personal level. And one of the things that I talked about was that sometimes leaders call me as one more citizen. And that sort of just doesn't make sense. Every leader of every organization should be taking care of their organization in the like manner that you see Alan Russell. Well, what is he doing? He's not only taking care of his organization, he's taking care of his industry. And if every one of us took that approach of saying, what can I do, from volunteering my employees to communicating to them, to getting them on the right path, all of this is going to be very helpful. I'm very thankful, Mayor Margo and I, mostly Mayor, putting together a task force that I'm going to be participating in, and I'll be one of the lead with Mayor Margo. We had a conversation this morning. We've got some of the best people working on the recovery portion of what we're going to talk about today. The recovery is going to be, I would say, the best analogy I can give you is that when you have a knee surgery and you don't go through the rehab properly, you're going to suffer for a lifetime. The recovery is the same way. Once we understand that we're headed towards this recovery and opening the economy, you do the same thing. It's sort of a rehab process of trying to do the best that we can so that when we are completely available, we are not dealing with the fact that we left some things behind and that we didn't do the things that we should have done. We cannot go back and remember to say we should have done this or we should have done that. And one of the things that has come out here that's very important is the fact that we are learning tremendously. You know, the idiom, necessity is the mother of invention. I can tell you, how many times have we been on a broadcast like today when we've got over 300 people that are listening? This is the outcome of our understanding of technology and really taking and learning from it. So finally, I'd like to say, you know, I want to thank the fact that we're moving forward. I want to hold together as a region. We want to be in lockstep. I'm very encouraged by our community and very encouraged by the guests on the panel today. And we have tremendous opportunity to be a role model for the rest of the country. We've done it before in a lot of different ways, even including the Maquiladora. Let's be a role model on how a community gets together, fights a pandemic, flattens the curve, and then eventually that we come out as a strong economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Samaniego, for reminding us that we're in this together as we have been throughout past crises, but also through the many inspiring things that we are as a region, the kind of things that we have done together, and also reminding us that there is this for those who work in the world of universities and economic development, there is this whole idea of the Triple Helix, which is really, you can say, it's 4 or 5 different things coming together. That really universities have an important role to play along with government, business, and civil society, right? Not any one single element of these is enough. It's gonna save. It's gonna save, or is going to on its own get us towards the kind of recovery that we need, and that's the spirit motivating this conversation, right? The collaboration, and to see what we can learn from it. So now the floor, the chat is open to questions. You can, all of those attending can submit a question in the chat function. If you go to the bottom part of your Zoom window, there is a chat function, and then a little window will open up and you can submit your questions there. Right now, let me tell you what the first question we have here is, and this one is for Alan, but it might help, others might have insights here, which is, you spoke, Alan, about essential businesses, right? And how, challenging it has been to define, enforce, change what that definition is. So one question here is, how can a region work together to get Washington's or, Mexico City's or them together help in aligning the essential businesses at both sides of the border? I mean, you described this really interesting dynamic that you foresee, Alan, that, things open up in one side of the border while the others don't on the left. And what is that going to mean in terms of, losing business for the region? So how can we promote this alignment?
We have to be a voice. We need everyone to be a voice. We need Judge Samaniego to be a voice and express that to Washington, and to, of course, the contact may be our governor of the state, and then up to Washington, the governor of Chihuahua, and then to Mexico City. The more voices we can get, the better chance we have of somebody listening. So there's no silver bullet. It's going to take a lot of communication. The university stepping forward with that voice and recognizing the impact that this could have on our region, from international students coming across from Mexico, and the workforce migrating back and forth. So it's all about reaching out and being a voice, continuous, not letting up, and not letting our guard down.
Having a unified voice to the extent that we can, right, around this issue on both sides of the border. The next question that I have here is, from the three of your experiences, university, corporation, and government, what do you think is the biggest lesson to date that you would want to share with other organizations in your areas of work? Chancellor with another university, Alan with a corporation, Judge Samaniego with government. Can you reflect a bit on the lessons?
Judge?
Go ahead. Alan, go ahead.
Judge, you want to go first, Judge?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that one of the lessons is also to look at what we did right and not to move forward as if we haven't done the right things, because we need to reinforce the positive elements that I discussed today, the relationships with the university, the relationships with our community, that our community trusts us, that, you know, having trusting voices in our community is really important. And so when our elected officials speak, and if they are of the caliber that they should be with respect to their honor and respect, and their dignity is how they do things, then the community gets behind us. And what we said earlier about coming together, being one strong voice. You know, I can tell you how there's so many times that I have heard people from Austin, people from Washington, that have come here and said this is the first time they've been here. And you can imagine me sitting a couple of months back with the Economic Development, Texas Economic Development Department, sitting down with them and telling me that this is the first time they have been in the El Paso region. That is a lesson that we're working on tremendously, so that we are able to pick up the phone, have people that can reach the governor, have people that can get to Washington, have that strength. And I think El Paso, we were so isolated in this, not just El Paso, but in this region was so isolated that we took it upon ourselves thinking that it's sort of self-survival. And I think that now we are going to have to leverage every possible governmental opportunity that we have, every lobbyist, every person that we have, that we need to bring them together, that we cannot stop making the calls. We cannot stop, you know, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. That's going to be us. One voice, really strong, but we have a long ways to go in this governmental relationships. And I think that's my lesson learned, is that as much as I wanted to be an organizational focus and a CEO of the organization, I also have to be a strong political figure in this community and gather my network to be able to be that voice that Alan spoke about.
Any other thoughts?
Fighting back.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Fighting back is the key. Not letting this virus control us to destination. 12 hours a day, 14 hours a day, from home, wherever you are, to fight back. Seek those opportunities to be a voice and to make a difference and help others along the way.
I think it's also important, you know, as I look at it from a university perspective, that, you know, running an institution like our system that's got a main campus, community colleges, is complex. And I think we started with that theme earlier, the complexities that we have to deal with. I think there is a great deal of value in collaborating among ourselves, discussing things, and you know, to a great degree on what's working, what's not working, share those best practices with our other communities. You know, one thing we've done in New Mexico, which I'm particularly pleased about, is that, you know, our governor has provided, you know, statewide guidance around, you know, the parameters of social distancing, but higher ed has been given a kind of a special designation. We are still a state agency, but for the most part, we are allowed to make local decisions. I think that is an important part of what we've learned, and it helps us with our regional thing, because you know, as Dr. Wilson and I frequently talk about, sometimes we have more in common among citizens of El Paso, Las Cruces, and Juarez than any of us do with our respective you know, state capitals of either Austin or Santa Fe. And what we learn is that given that flexibility to work collaboratively as a region makes us better, stronger, and able to manage, I think, the challenges that, you know, the state officials at their level are trying to, you know, get their arms around it. But there's no substitute for the local dynamic that we all have to control. So, you know, top level guidance is fine. Local implementation, I think, is something we need to coordinate with our respective communities.
Good. Thank you, the three of us, for offering your perspective on this. There are two related questions that have come up. As you know, we've been talking about this need to balance, well, you know, public health first, and, you know, the people with the economic recovery and reopening the economy. And from the lessons we've learned from other places, there are two issues that are critical that you have brought up in one of other way, one or another way. One is contact tracing. You know, that that will be critical. This is the first question. Contact tracing will be critical to any path forward. Is it feasible for our region to create the best contact tracing covering 3 states and 2 countries? Please.
Yeah, so let me, we call it the triad that we need to all be focused on. The first is, if we had better testing, that would be very important. The second piece is the contact tracing, and I think that's an incredibly big piece of it. The triad part is the personal responsibility that we need to continue to practice, with all of our citizens. So again, getting that message out, that's important. Relative to contact tracing, what we're looking at, in fact, at NMSU, one of the things that we're doing is, as we have a limited staff on campus that is ultimately responsible for doing our essential services, both dining for the students and that are still on campus and essential functions that we have to perform, what we've done is we've locked down all our buildings. And so you have to have your access card in order to go into a building, so that we can actually know who's been in that building, when they came in, when they were out, so that if we have a person who gets tested positive, that we can trace all of their contacts and do the necessary isolating that's occurring. What we're looking into right now, though, is there's a number of apps. There's a Google app that allows you to essentially, to use your mobile device as a way in which you can trace your whereabouts. And if you come into contact with somebody that also has been tested positive, that this app would alert you. So we're looking at what kinds of technology solutions are there for us going forward to manage all of our population in a way that is, again, using the high-tech skills of our current technology, but also making sure that we're following a protocol of this important triad that I mentioned earlier. So I think that's an excellent question, and one that we're looking into very aggressively.
Any thoughts from?
What he's doing at the university is exactly what we do in our factories. We have somebody with a temperature, we isolate, we go to our protocol, we sanitize, we find out who they've been in contact with, we quarantine. Those protocols are paramount to success. Yeah,
kind of the best practices that have been learned around the world about how to deal with this, right? The other related question to
yes, I just want to shout out to our public health, Dr. Ocaranza, who has done a tremendous job of being a leader and making sure that this contact tracing is done properly, that it's governed. We ever hear, and we did yesterday in one of our calls here, about a situation that they felt had not been done properly. And so if there's anybody out there who feels that we could have done a better job of contact tracing, please let our public health department know, because that is one of the keys. If we don't trace and track, that's going to be a difficult situation for us. And the complexity, obviously, is as you could see. So just want to make sure UMC has also done a tremendous job. Jacob Cintron, our CEO, our private hospital. So just once again, let's give them that credit that they need, because it is a very complex situation.
Very good. Thank you all. The related question, which to some degree has been addressed, has to do with testing, right? The widespread testing capabilities that are needed, along with, as part of this equation. You can offer any thoughts on how and when are we going to make testing available on a wide-scale basis?
Yeah, that's a topic of great research, Carlos. I think it's going on across the country. I think what we'll see is a lot of money being spent at the federal government level with various agencies that will encourage all kinds of, hopefully, new innovations and entrepreneurship. It's one thing to have, kind of acceptable tests, and I've been working with the CDC and a variety of others trying to stand a testing capability at NMSU that would help the southern part of the state of New Mexico. Right now, we only have one testing lab in Albuquerque, a couple of commercial testing labs, but we can't really manage any kind of widespread testing. So there's 2 different kinds of tests. There's the antigens, which has to do with the antibodies. There's which obviously we can hear about in the news, and the other is the nucleic tests, which are more more definitive, more specific. They give you, very, very accurate results. The problem with it is that the reagents are expensive, the equipment that it takes are expensive. It's not an easy thing to do. But I think the country as a whole needs to be looking for incredibly innovative solutions to get us to widespread testing. That really is our insulation against these kind of future pandemics, that we know will be coming our way. So if we don't have a consolidated effort, and this is something I think we can focus on our medical schools. I know the Texas Tech Medical School there in El Paso, VCOM here in the Burrell, Doctor of Osteopathic Medicine here in Las Cruces, other medical centers as well can help us, I think, pull together a consolidated effort, and we would welcome the opportunity to do collaboration with others to do widespread testing research.
Very good, thank you. We have one last question, and I will ask that only one of you addresses these questions because of our limited time, so that we have a couple of minutes for final remarks from each of you, which is, we're in this remote world right now. So what is your perspective towards remote work as an ongoing activity and the regional challenges you see in this practice in terms of workforce development and infrastructure? Really interesting question, right? Workforce development and infrastructure as it relates to remote work. Who would like to address this question primarily?
Well, the county, I mean, maybe I could speak specifically for the county that we have learned that our technology, and we said here earlier about the fact that we're reaching so many people. We've had town meetings where we have 7 or 8 people and make a lot of energy to get these town meetings. Now town meetings being broadcasted are getting 50, 60, 70 people, and even as much as 100 people in this technology. So we now understand, and the Chancellor spoke about it earlier, that we were sort of hesitant to go into this new world of technology and having people work from home. The county, for example, we're looking for more space, and that was going to be an expensive venture for us to do. And now maybe we could look at all the people that were very successful working telecommuting from home. And it's also, we need to be progressive with our workforce. Our workforces are now looking at more flexibility. They're looking at the opportunity to do other things. And we don't want to lose that workforce. And that workforce that we keep talking about, the brain drain, where they go to some areas that are much more progressive and that are able to have flexible hours and are able to have a different type of workforce. And so I think this might be another angle of keeping our young people that were leaving our region that might be more interested if we give them some of these options of the things we've learned in the area of technology. So the county is very, very interested in focusing on what we learned and going into this area of telecommuting and all these other things that have happened in the last couple of weeks.
Alan, you had something to say about that.
It's a little more difficult in the manufacturing business. I'll just say that.
That's a fascinating question, right? What are the kinds of work that lend themselves to be working remotely? What are the ones that require ongoing face-to-face interaction, and certainly making is one of those. So we have 2 minutes left, and I would like if any one of you would like to offer, some final thoughts before we finalize the conversation. And before you offer your remarks, I just want to thank the 3 of you for participating, all of the attendees. We have like 50 or 60 questions. So that were addressed along many subjects. I apologize that we cannot address all of them. So any final thoughts?
I'll take 30 seconds since I've got a hard stop here momentarily. Let me just say a couple of things. I have been thoroughly impressed with the remarkable response of so many people, both at the leadership level and even the rank and file. There's a lot of very, very wonderful heroes that are out there doing amazing work. So we need to acknowledge the fact that our region, our communities have really responded well. And I want to acknowledge that because there's a lot of people doing a lot of things right. We hear about all the bad things. I get all that. But I think we started with it, and I think we should end with it, and that is, collaboration, communication, and we all are in this together. So let's work together to create a better future for ourselves. So I appreciate the opportunity to continue this dialogue in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor. Alan?
So as we start opening our economy and progressing toward business, trying to get to what we will call as usual. Do not let your guard down. This is dangerous. Keep your guard up, keep the protocols in place. Otherwise, we'll have a setback. So please adhere to everything that we've learned so far and don't let up.
Extremely important. Thank you, Alan. Judge?
Well, I think, we've all said pretty much the same. We're very strong in collaboration and the spirit of things, but I would like to now just really quickly comment in Spanish. A nuestra audiencia que tenemos, a nuestros amigos, a las personas que nos están escuchando, que se sientan muy parte de lo que estamos haciendo en estas conversaciones y que sientan que están apoyados y que la comunicación es muy importante. Le damos gracias a una comunidad que es muy generosa, que ha hecho todo lo posible para hacerlo mejor. Estamos muy orgullosos en esta comunidad y sentimos que va a ser el espíritu de cada uno de ustedes, esa formación que tenemos en la cultura no únicamente de hispana, pero las culturas diferentes que tenemos aquí en esta región. Pero yo estoy seguro que la solución va a ser esa energía, ese coraje, esa pasión que tenemos de decir, vamos a ser los mejores, vamos a salir de aquí mejor que cualquier otra comunidad y vamos a sentir que vamos a ser gran parte de la manera que lo van a hacer en otras partes del país. Le damos muchas gracias. Un abrazo, como estamos diciendo, un abrazo muy grande virtual a todos nuestros participantes ahora en esta comunicación. Muchísimas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, juez, por esas palabras en español que nos recuerdan no que nos recuerda porque nunca olvidamos que somos una comunidad bilingüe y binacional y bicultural, ¿no? Y que es parte de esa es la fortaleza que nos va a llevar adelante después de esta crisis. So thank you everyone for attending. Thank you again to the panelists. You will get an email with a link to the recording of this conversation and also an email with information about the next regional community conversation. On behalf of the Arrowhead Center and NMSU, Medical Center of the Americas, Pioneers 21, and Technology Hub, thank you all for joining us today, and we look forward to having you all joining us at the next conversation. Muchas gracias a todos y que tengan muy buenas tardes.
Hasta luego.